Welcome to Story Comic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 306. I'm your host, Barney Smith of StoryComic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the worldwide celebrated and talented comic creator, Jorge Medina. George.
Thank you so much for having me back, Barney. I appreciate this. Thank you. And I'm happy to be back. And I love the intro. I love it.
See, I mean, and also too, you're internationally acclaimed too. I didn't mention that, but you are also internationally acclaimed.
You keep people guessing. Is what you do, Barney. I thought you were coming with one thing, and you gave me the. It was great. I love it.
So it's really exciting because you're back on the show, and you were on when you were on earlier a couple of years ago. We were really kind of focusing on your Adventures of Wonder Duck, which I'm a huge fan of that.
Oh,
and you're here to kind of resurface for all of your readers and some of your fans was Russ 5377, which was a precursor to Wonder Duck. That's correct?
Yeah. So the publishing history of those two projects was Russ came first, publishing wise, and then Wonder Duck came after. The way they were created, however, was Wonder Duck was created first, and then I created Wonder Duck. I mean, Wonder Duck came first, then I created Russ. So yeah, so that's kind of the thing. But I'm putting Russ out now digitally through Hades and his anyoneworld.com platform, which is similar. Right. It's kind of like in the vein of say what Comixology was, or Global Comics, for those who maybe don't know what Any One World is. It's kind of like in the vein of that, except he's also a publisher, and so he publishes indies as well. So yeah, it's been a blast working with them. But that's where Russ is currently.
All right. So talk to us a little bit about Russ and what is the series about?
Sure. So back in the early, I was gonna say late 90s, about 98, 99. Yeah. Long time ago, boy. Long time ago. I was a young man with high hopes and expectations and dreams, right? I was just graduating college at the time, and I was working at a group home or an orphanage, or one of these homes for kids. And I was doing data entry work. I wasn't like a social worker or anything like that. It was just like a little side gig I had during college. I was working at this orphanage. I was doing data entry work. I would enter the names of the kids that were being put into the home and stuff like that. And one of the names that I entered into the system was a name of a kid named Nonami. Nonami. I was like, well, that sounds cool, man. That's Nonami. The actual name was No Name. The kid had no name. Nonami was no name.
Okay.
And when I saw that, I was like, geez, man, that's crazy. Like, obviously these kids, they're in foster homes and they go through all this stuff. And then I thought about it, and I had doodled Russ, the Russ character, on a piece of paper, and I was like, I didn't have an idea of what to do with him. It was just a doodle in class. But when this happened at the orphanage, I said, you know what? What if my character, this little character that I created, what if this guy? I decided, you know what? What if this kid, 17-year-old Russ? I named him Russ. I don't know what the name came. Just Russ. What if Russ lived in this orphanage? And what if Russ and his friends needed to escape? Why would they need to escape? Well, because the home is being run by demented scientists trying to create the perfect specimen. So they would take these boys and experiment on them, trying to create the perfect specimen. And when those experiments went awry, they would just get rid of them. Where they go, you will find out in the pages of the book. But that's kind of like where the story came, and that's where I was like, oh, okay, let me develop this, let me start this, and let me see where it goes. And that's where the story kind of was born.
So how many? So as you mentioned before, this is how many issues is Russ right now?
It's 6. It's a 6-issue limited series. It's this is chapter 1, and I'm putting them out every month. So chapters 1 through 3 are out right now. And by the time this airs, I'm not sure when this will air, but the 4th one may be out already, because it's as of this recording, September. The next issue will be out September 20th is when the 4th issue will be out. And then in October, you'll have the next one. The 6th episode will be in November at that point. Yeah.
And so how did this kind of help you grow as a comic creator as well as this being your first series? What are some of the things that Russ taught you as a creator that you actually utilize today?
When I started, so the idea came in that year, right? 99.
Mm,
In
yeah.
2002, 2003, around that time, I took a learning, like an advanced learning class at the School of Visual Arts. Because, I was like, I always wanted to draw comics and I wanted to do my own comic and stuff like that. So I went and I took, like one of those classes at SBA where I met, we were talking about Sam earlier, before we came on. He's my co-host on Catch the Craze on the podcast that we do, and I met him there. So in the class, the teacher said, "Hey, today we're going to do, we're going to create your own character. You're going to bring it in, and we're gonna develop it and make a comic book out of it." So that's where I brought the idea of Russ, and so this Russ 5377. This story was my first attempt at doing comics the traditional way, and what I mean by that is 11 by 17 pieces of paper, scripts, with panels and all that other stuff. Prior to that, I was drawing these things on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, folding them in half, and just kind of like drawing as I went along. There was no script. It was just the story was being created as I was drawing it. So Russ taught me how to do it the traditional way, with a script, from script to pencils to inks to colors to letters. So
Right.
yeah, so that was a big learning curve when it came to Russ.
And so who's the artist for this?
I Okay, so originally in the first incarnation of the story, I was the
Right.
artist, and I
Okay.
actually drew 3 issues of the book, and then I hit a wall. I hit a wall. I
Mm,
didn't know where I was going with the story because even though I had started doing it the traditional way, I was new to it. This was a long time, and I had no idea that I probably should have plotted this thing out to figure out how the story was going to go, and I never did that. So, plus, when I finished my first issue, I sent it out for review. I sent it out for review for a critic to take a look at it. They saw it, they critiqued it, they killed it. Right? They said
wow.
that the artwork was garish and it was gaudy. Um, the story, however, they liked. They liked where it
Okay.
was going. So, in hearing that, I was like, "Damn! All right, maybe I should focus on the story and hire an artist to do it. I'm not going to give up on the story. I'm not going to
Mm,
let that one, critique or critic derail, my dreams and aspirations." But I realized at that point that drawing the book was going to be quite a task that I wasn't ready to take on.
mm.
So I decided to focus on the writing, created an outline, plotted it out, wrote it, and I was like, okay, now it's making sense. And so I hired artists. I went through, back in that time, it wasn't like Instagram. You couldn't just go on Instagram and find yourself an artist, or you couldn't go on, on Facebook or anything like that. So I was in the forums. I was in back in like digital webbing, if anybody remembers that,
Yeah.
digitalwebbing.com. And I found, actually Sam found them first, and then he told me, "Hey, check out these artists, dude." And they were in the Philippines. They were called Big Cat Studios at the time. They are now called
Right.
Nine Life Studios. And now they actually do a lot of work for a lot of manga animation. And they've worked on Castlevania. The studio has grown as time has progressed. But I hired them to do it. I send them my images, I send them my characters, and I said, "Hey, can you give me a mix of Boondocks? Remember that cartoon, the
Yeah.
Boondocks,
Yeah.
and Dragon Ball Z? Give me that mix. Can you mix that up together?" And this is what they came up with. And so they started doing all of the artwork, and it was a good mesh, and I enjoyed working with them. So they did everything. They penciled and colored everything, and I did the lettering in the book.
Are you going to come back to Russ since you only did 6 issues of it?
Yes, yes. So currently, I'm actually developing a follow up, storyline, or just more stories based
Okay.
on what happens after the ending of this. Remember, this is the story of Russ in this orphanage. He finds out that kids are being experimented on, and he decides, hey guys, we have to get the heck out of here. And so this
Mm,
particular arc is about them trying to escape. By
right.
the end of this thing, you're going to find out if they escaped, who managed to get out, and how they did it. The stories that I'm writing now are about, the characters that survived and what happens after the fact. Because part of the story of Russ is that he is this orphan. He's an orphan, right? He doesn't know where he came from. And part of what I wanted to kind of do with the story, it's a coming of age story, right? It's this kid who has no idea who his parents were, and it
Right.
links back to these kids that I wasn't around so much, but digitally I can see that they were alone. So in this story, Russ did have a mom, obviously, and so now his mission, after he finds out who he is and he's remembering these things that he's not supposed to remember, because these dementia scientists also put chips in kids' minds that
Oh
erases all
wow.
their memories, right? But he's starting to remember these things, so that chip is malfunctioning. They're wondering what the heck's going on with this kid, and he becomes an issue. He becomes a problem for them. But in these dreams, he has vivid dreams of his childhood, of a childhood he shouldn't remember. He remembers a friend, a buddy of his, like a little girl that he used to be friends with, and her uncle or somebody that she was related to. He remembers his woman, is his mom. And so he decides, I have to find these people. I have to know where they went. Where did they go? And so the story after this particular first issue is about his quest to find out more about who he is. Where did these people go that he remembers? Who are they? And so that's
Mm.
kind of like what I'm going to be writing moving forward, is that. And I always had that. And that was the plan always, was to create this 6-issue arc, see how it did. And then based on that, see if I can maybe create more stories. You know what I mean? And his thing is finding who he is and where he came from and his mom.
What are some of other writers that have inspired you as a writer?
Oh, well, I mean, ever since, I mean, even I, I would think I was here the last time, and I talked about, it was Walt Disney, it was Hanna Barbera, and it was those. But I think
Right.
as I entered the world of comics, I obviously, I read a lot of Chris Claremont style, Frank Miller, those guys, and how they were able to move stories along. But I also was inspired by Quentin Tarantino as a writer, and dialogue, writing dialogue, like the way he wrote dialogue. I think it comes from different places. One of my favorite writers, prose writers, is Mitch Albom. He's written things like Tuesdays with Morrie. He wrote,
Hmm.
he wrote that. He wrote those books, and Five People You Meet in Heaven. And so I love his narrative storytelling and how he makes you think. He gives these people stories beyond just what's happening on the page. There's a background to them, and I think that writing characters is something that I love to do, and basing them on real things, even though they're fictional. I like to base them on things that could really happen to you, right? Like these
Mm.
kids, for example. A lot of the kids in the home are based on friends of mine that I went to college with, their personalities, and things like that. So, yeah, a lot of things have influenced me as a writer when it comes to
Right.
writing for comics and stuff.
Was there ever a writer that you used to not care for that now you have grown to appreciate?
I've always kind of like stayed in my, I guess, when I say stay in my lane, I kind of just kind of like said, all right, let me try to focus on developing my own style, right?
Right.
And I think as you get older, you appreciate the fact that you're not going to know everything there is to know about writing, and so you go and you kind of like, the more you read, the more you realize, wow, these guys were saying something. If I had to make a choice, I'm not a big horror reader. I don't read horror. I love
Okay.
horror movies. I like to be scared, but I feel like nothing scares me like that. And I know that Stephen King gets a lot of praises for it. And I would say maybe Stephen King is one of those writers that I was like, what's the big deal with Stephen King? But the more the more the older I get, the more I realize, hey, this guy, all he does is write bestsellers. Even if he's not a great writer, he sure knows how to sell his writing. He knows how to write to sell books. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's also important when we're doing this thing. It's not just being that deep, right? It's not just, they can't all be Steinbecks, right? But Stephen King sells books, and I think that I learned to appreciate that as I got older. If that's
Right.
maybe that's one guy. Now that I, that
Mm.
I talked myself into that answer.
So what's your favorite underappreciated either comic book title or book?
A book that I didn't appreciate when I was younger, I think, was Watchmen.
Mm,
Right. It was one of those books that's got so many layers, it's so deep that
right.
as a kid growing up reading comics, I'm like, I'd rather read, Spider-Man, kind of, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, swinging through town. But the older I got, the more I got into reading Watchmen and
Mm,
understanding, wow, what he was doing with these characters was crazy. So yeah, so I think I learned to appreciate that, and obviously that's one of the best comics probably ever written for most people. And here I am saying, hey, that thing was crap when I was a kid, but but I didn't get it. I just didn't get it. I think I was too young to understand
right.
how good that book was.
And so what's your it's a comic book adjacent question is like what would you consider your writing kryptonite? Like what's your writing weakness?
Hmm. I think I take too long to develop a world. In other
Mm,
words, I spend so much time creating stuff that you're never going to read, that you're never going to know about before I actually get into writing the script and getting into the story that I'm going to tell.
right.
Um, and I got to find a way to kind of like figure out how to say, okay, I've created this. I know what this world is like. Let me just get into it, rather than, all right, no, but I can do this and then I can do that, and then put more things here behind the scenes that you're never going to read. And sometimes I never get to the story because I'm so busy building this world, and a year or two has gone by and I'm still creating this world, and it's like, all right, but we need to put this book out. So I
Right.
think my kryptonite is just that. It's like, it's just, I'm so, I want to create the perfect world, you know what I mean, so that I don't have to, so I'm not struggling telling the story later on. I figure everything is done here. But I think stories are organic, and sometimes they just grow, right? Sometimes no matter how much you plan them, they're going to change. They're going to change.
Right.
I just got to learn how to build a base, and keep that strong base and then move from there. So yeah, I think that would be it.
And so, compared to when you first wrote Russ 5377, um, if you could talk to your earlier self as you're putting that together, what advice would you give your earlier self?
I think I would tell them that, you know the story of Russ, and especially during that first stint where I was drawing it. I think that I probably would have told him to just don't rush it.
Hmm.
I remember being, it was like the night before a convention, or maybe a week or so before a convention, and I'm drawing these pages and I'm lettering these pages and I'm trying to get this book out. I don't even have a book four ready, but book three I had to get done, and it was such a rush job. And I think I would tell him, listen, man, I learned it too late, but I would say, write, plot this thing out, write it out. Don't leave it up here. Put it on paper, put it on, or on the screen, or whatever you want to do, but don't keep it up here, because it'll get muddled up there. And I know a lot of people
Right.
can do that. A lot of people will be like, it's all here. It's here. I know the story. It's there. But for me, I think I would tell my younger self, write it down, write it down, figure it out, and it'll be easier to put it out once you do that.
Right. Do you get something? Uh, what's your preferred audience? Do you like writing for, say, adults as compared to, say, like teens, or what audience do you prefer to write for?
I prefer to write for like kids and young adults, and the
Mm,
reason why, well, I feel like I'm a kid at heart, right? I'm like, I got the Peter Pan syndrome, like I'll never grow up. But also, I just feel like comic books are almost, I don't know, it would be so dramatic and call it a dying, a dying, a dying industry. But it just feels like it is sometimes, right? I
mm,
think less kids are reading books. Whereas, it's more adults. It's us. We grew up reading comics, so we continue to read comics. But the younger, the younger audience, the kids, that's who I want to pick up books like I picked up books when I was a kid. When I picked up the first time I picked up Iron Man, or the first time I picked up Thor or Spider Man. Like, wow, what the heck? This is incredible. This is cool.
right.
Like that's kind of like the feeling that I want to give readers, and so that's who I write for. I write for that kid that's going to pick up that comic book for the first time and say, dude, this is an incredible world. I want to create worlds like this. I want to do this. I want to
Right.
keep reading this and keep doing it. So that's who I gear to. I mean, I like to write about, I like to watch all kinds of movies. So I like to write about different things, but I find myself going that route. Like even like the other stories that I'm writing now.
Let's talk about some advice as well. Like for those that are listening that are looking at going into indie comics or actually wanting to write comics, um, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them that it's going to be expensive. If you're a writer, it's going to be very expensive. Artists are not cheap. When I started doing this, and this is going back to like 99.
Right.
The deal that I got to draw this book is something that you will never be able to get. The deal that I got to write this book is probably what you would pay to do 2 pages of a book, 3 pages of a book. That that's how. So,
Right.
but things have, artists are charging $100 a page on a 22-page book, and that's just a penciler. So just the penciler will cost you, that much money, right? So when you're thinking about coming into this, make sure you have the money to pay an artist. If you're an artist, and you are, you think you can write it out. Me personally, and I have a lot of friends who are artists and they prefer to just go right into it. Sometimes they don't even write scripts, they just go right into it. If you're a writer who or an artist who thinks you can do it, I still would get an editor. I think we need editors. As a writer too, I think you need an editor. I think don't go in it alone. Don't think, okay, what I wrote is gonna hit. I'm gonna put it on the. Hey, listen, if you're Faulkner, if you're that good, God bless you. But I think that, yeah, I think you got to go into this with the right mentality. I think you got to know that it's going to cost you a lot of money. Make sure you have a lot of money to do this. It's not cheap. You're not going into this to make thousands and hundreds. I mean, if it's a good story, yeah, hey, good, you may. But I think you'll be surprised how much it's going to cost you to create a book. And then if you're an artist, I think, don't take shortcuts. Get yourself an editor. Write something down. Give it to somebody. Say, hey, is this making sense? Is this how's this sounding? Does it make sense? Because and I feel for artists because they'll start drawing something. They'll be 20 pages into a drawn book or something, and they realize, damn, I'm gonna have to redraw this page, and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to do that. So
As a comic book writer and as a creator, how many do you have any unfinished projects, or do you have projects that kind of sitting in the wings that you're kind of anxious to get back to?
yes, yeah. So speaking about one of your questions was about like the audience, right? Who I write for.
Mm,
So I have a story that I'm developing that I've been writing, but it's darker in tone, right? It was I started writing it during a breakup, and so I was like, I don't want to say a dark place, but I was upset. I was grieving because of a a relationship that ended, and so I started writing a story about being brokenhearted, and but it but
mm,
it, it it went into the idea of what if that person that you broke up with you, or you broke up with, didn't just break up with you, but they passed away. What happens? How do you
mm,
deal with that?
right.
So that's been kind of sitting, because ever since after that, my life is different now. I'm not in that place anymore. So going back to that place is kind of hard because I'm not there emotionally, mentally. So I haven't finished it. And that's obviously for an older audience. It's not for young adults, whatever. So that's
Right.
one that I haven't finished. And I plan on it because I really do like the story. So I plan on going back to it. And then I have two other stories. One, and I can talk about it because I send my copyrights out and all that other stuff. It's called The Shameless Plug,
Okay.
and The Shameless Plug is a story about a little kid, about 9 or 10 years old, who comes to the United States from another country and has to find a way to fit in. And so he's shy. He doesn't know the language, but he creates or meets this imaginary friend called Pana, and Pana's a plug. He's a little plug. He's like a plug that you plug on the TV, and he becomes his imaginary friend. He is
Okay.
Pana, the shameless plug. He teaches Joaquin, is the name of the kid, how he's going to be able to fit in. And sometimes, in order to fit in, you have to be yourself. And so that's what the story is about: is how do you fit in when you feel like an outsider? And Pana becomes this imaginary friend that's going to help him through it. And so that I'm writing that. I'm actually finishing that up. I'm about to send it out to my editor. I'm looking for an artist. So if you are watching the show and you're an artist, and I don't know if you know this, Barney, but I'm from Ecuador. I was born in Ecuador. I came here when I was like 7 years old. So it's almost autobiographical in a way. And I'm hoping to find like an Ecuadorian artist, just to make it come full circle. And so I'm trying to do that. So I'm hoping to have this out hopefully sometime next year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So right now, like I said, I'm going to be sending it out to an editor, have them look at it, send it back to me, and then I'll send it out to the artist, and I can get rocking on it. So yeah, it should be fun.
Perfect. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So George, if people want to learn more about you, where's the best place they could go to?
Yeah, definitely go to getyourmedz.com. That's my website right there. You can follow me on Instagram at get_your_meds. You can also find my work obviously on my website. I have tons of stuff in there that you guys can look through. I also, like we were talking, Russ 5377 is currently on the Any One World, I call it network, but a platform. You can go there. The first 3 issues are available now. And if you type in the word podcast, you're watching this podcast, if you type in the word podcast at checkout, you get 15% off.
Wow.
So
Okay,
make sure
that's
you do
pretty
that.
cool.
Yeah, make sure you do that. Yeah. So if you guys decide that you want to go to the anyoneworld.com website and you want to buy the books, they're reasonably under $2. Just make sure that when you check out, type in the word podcast if you saw it on this podcast, and you'll get 15% off. That other book that you have there talking about who I write for and whatever. So that is Dead of Night, and that is a book that ASAP Imagination, which is a publisher run by Paul Hades Hayden. He actually asked me to write the next 3 issues of this book, The Dead of Night, and it's a book that should be coming out hopefully soon. I wrote the second script. I'm writing scripts 2 through 4, and it's the story of a night, of an actual night, and it takes place in England. There is an event that occurred that changed London forever, and the night was this well-to-do. He comes from a well-to-do family, and he kind of like goes mad and resurfaces now. And this is the story of him and what's going to happen after he resurfaces after this event occurred. So The Dead of Night, it should be coming out soon. So I'm having fun writing that, and that's more along the lines of like, when I used to read comics back in the days, right? Where it was still action adventure. It wasn't too mature, but it wasn't kiddie. It was like right in that sweet spot where like kids can, somebody who's maybe 12, 13 can read it and not have to hide it from their parents. But, people our age can read it and enjoy it as well. So yeah, that's coming out. It should be cool. The Dead of Night. Love the title too. I love the title. That was created by Hades. So that's cool. It's coming out.
That book sounds amazing too, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. No, I'd love to come back and talk to you more about how I developed it and where it came from and all that stuff. But yeah, that'll be fun.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, George. It was great having you come back on.
No, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much, man. This has been a lot of fun.
That what I do is because I have to edit it after the fact.
Uh-huh.
Like the more succinct, then I actually edit out all my ums and make it look like I'm really smart. And then
it works. It works, buddy. You got me fooled. I
know. I got everybody fooled.
Nah, man. Listen.